Okay, welcome back, everybody. I know it has been a little while since we have done a podcast, but we do have kind of a special one for you. But before we get into that, I do want to just let everyone know, current sponsor, if you do text the word football to 253-736-5133, you can sign up for just $10 a month to receive an email from me every now and again. So $10 a month, you can sign up for that. Again, 253-736-5133. On a more serious note, though, you can go to youtube.com. That is the youtube.com and search for League of Shadows Fantasy Football. We do have a channel there that we're working on. This podcast will be split into 3 different sections for each of our special guests. But then on YouTube, again, that is the YouTube, at youtube.com, search for League of Shadows Fantasy Football. We have a channel there. We have some punishments going up. The past podcasts are going to be going up as well. This one will be in full there for everyone's enjoyment. All right, now my first special guest, you are actually my co-host today. The third place finisher from this last season. I have the great Chubba Wumba. Yeah, I was going to call you Mickey Mania.
I mean, you could. That's the wrong one.
Yeah.
You put some good adjectives in there. Positive, uplifting.
It's the Chubba Wumba,
Yep.
everybody. All right, welcome in. How you doing?
It's a bit rainy out, but good.
That has
Starting
no
off fun.
relevancy to the recording, but we are going to just kind of jump right into this one. We are looking forward into the NFL season, and obviously we are looking towards keepers, and we'll get to them in just a second. But first, wanted to chat with you about some rule ideas. Every year we try to make everything competitive in the League of Shadows. We try to chat a little bit about just different options, that sort of thing. So a couple ideas that have been floated out, and you can obviously say your opinion or say how great my team was last year, whatever you want to do, that's fine. The first rule that we actually wanted to talk about was was off-season waivers. Now, at this point, it does lock after the season is done. Obviously, you don't necessarily have access to Yahoo in the off-season, but then as soon as the league just kind of kicks up after the draft, that's when waivers are available. Now, you can do trades, everything like that at this point, but something that we might consider is allowing off-season pickups. Now, rookies post the April draft would not be available, but there are some guys that obviously you wait right at the last minute to, if you want to pick them up, if you want to trade them, if somebody retires. I mean, is there a thought process on allowing off-season waivers, or what do you think?
I don't see the harm in it. I think after keepers, there's no movement, and I think that should stick. Unless the
Well, that wouldn't change, because once keepers are declared, that's you have your 6. You can't pick up guys.
That's what I'm saying. So because of that, I don't see why we shouldn't allow pickups and all that good stuff until then.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters much.
The only thing that we would have to worry about would obviously be waivers, because it would all be offline. Now, if you were to want to pick somebody up right now in the regular season, we have a waiver priority. Obviously, 10th gets first priority, and then last gets, or vice versa, right? 10th to first, that's how it's set up. Now, what I would suggest is in the off season, because everybody's kind of at a parity point, what I would suggest is a rolling waiver, meaning once you've exhausted your waiver, you then go to last waiver priority. For example, our 10th place finisher was Cass. If he were to pick somebody up in this off season, his priority would then go to 10, everybody else shuffling up 9. So Eli would go to first, and then so on and so forth, all the way up to you were third, so then you'd be, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, etc. And so every time you'd actually make a move, then you would go to the end of the line. That would be my suggestion, but obviously that'd be up for discussion. So that is our first rule suggestion. Our second rule suggestion that's a little more controversial, and there's a lot of debate from the people I've floated it to how it could potentially work or what we'd want to do. But the idea would be more of a lottery pick when it came to keepers. So right now we have 6 keepers that everybody keeps, and that's good for parity. There's not much shuffling when it comes to the top half of the board. Now, there are some leagues that you declare your keepers. You have one that the franchise tag would be you're guaranteed that person. The rest of your keepers would be put in a pool and randomly selected. One gets cut from your team without your choice. So, for example, my team right now obviously has Matt Ryan, Cooper Kupp, let's say Ezekiel Elliott, Travis Kelce, Saquon Barkley, and Christian McCaffrey. Let's say those are my 6 keepers. I have to choose one of them to be my franchise tag. Let's say it's Christian McCaffrey. I have Saquon, Kelce, Kupp, Boyd. Not Boyd. I'm sorry. I was looking at my roster. Kupp, Ryan, and Elliott as my 5. One of them would be randomly selected to be cut from my team. Now, I have no say in it. It would be random, and this would happen to every team. Now, while that sucks for someone like me at the chance of losing someone like Ezekiel Elliott or Saquon Barkley, the rest of you would have the chance then at getting him at number 1. Now, it would change 0 pick, and there is discussion on that one, but we'll get to that one in a second. But everybody would be in that kind of raffle stage where you get that one main keeper that you're guaranteed. The rest are up for debate. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't like it. I think I would want you to lose somebody from your team because you are stacked in top running backs. But I don't want to give up anybody on my team. And I think it's hard enough to narrow down your keepers to just 6. And the risk of losing somebody that you kind of had to narrow down that closely, that gives a whole bunch of anxiety I don't think I want.
Sure. And that would be one of the things that because you wouldn't know until at the draft. It'd add one of those in person. We'd all watch the disdain or the discomfort as we're waiting to find out if Boomer Busters gets to keep Mark Andrews or if all of a sudden, AJ Brown is the one that's available or Adams, or looking at any of these other teams. I mean, what would happen if Alvin Kamara suddenly became available? It would obviously reshuffle the entire way the draft board looks. Right now, we have all of the best players generally kept right off the bat. In the first round or two, we're kind of getting those second-tier players, and we're just kind of cleaning up everything, and the rest of it's just backups. But the idea of something like this is to, again, shuffle everything up. If we were looking at Alvin Kamara and, let's say, Patrick Mahomes and Ezekiel Elliott and Julio all suddenly becoming available in the first round, that drastically changes the dynamic of our draft day. And so while it would really suck for some of us, it could change the way. I mean, there would be a lot of discussions. There are some people that have suggested maybe instead of 6 keepers, we do 5. That way there are only 4 in the shuffle, so that way it adds more people to it. Other people have suggested instead of a regular 0 pick where that first pick off the board, potentially getting 0 pick and number 1 because they'd be able to walk away with Ezekiel Elliott and Julio Jones or what have you. Instead of something like that happening, is eliminating the 0 pick, and instead of that 0 pick contest being removed, we would shuffle or use that 0 pick to determine the draft order. And so, say for example, we were to do the punching bag. That was a good game that out of nowhere, there was greatness, weird party trick. But it would change everything because then Cass wouldn't necessarily have been first. He would have been second overall. And I would have been at first. He would have been a second, and so on. So it matters so much more with how you place in that. Obviously, you're going to try to skew the game still, as some people have. They pick a video game that they're really good at. Understandably, but now the rest of us who aren't necessarily as good at the game are still going to have to vie for that because I don't want to end up in 10th, right?
You could also do something with that where if you win the 0 pick, which I think we should probably change the name of it. If we're kind of taking away the concept, we should call it something else. But you could even throw in the bonus where that person doesn't have to put anybody in the pot to be cut. Maybe the person who wins that gets to keep their full
roster
as they want, and then it can still do the shuffle because I like the idea of how well you do affecting what draft order you get that way as opposed to how well your teams do. But I think that would be a little icing on the cake. Instead of getting to pick some random person, we're not going to throw you into the cut.
Yeah, or instead of getting those 2 picks, because that's kind of been the 0 pick, or I mean that would essentially become like you get 6. I do like that. But the thing about this is it's all up for discussion. It's all fluid. It's just an idea. Because one of the other things that I would personally float to people is because there are some teams sitting, for example, a Bloody Puddle has both Adam Thielen and Will Fuller at 3 years. Now we are going to talk about them in just 1 second, but I mean, if you didn't have to worry about tenure, or if we changed the way we did tenure, obviously these are all huge league-altering rules, and we're kind of getting to that point where parity is. I mean, we're kind of in a rhythm.
Right.
The thing that I do like about fantasy football, though, is the fact that we can constantly change everything, and that it's customizable, and competitive. And if we're constantly changing it, making it more interesting, we're not just one of those redraft leagues.'re not a league that just kind of sits. Oh yeah, I play a fantasy football league. It's like no. Whenever I'm at a place and they're like, oh, do you play fantasy football? I'm like,
Dynasty.
Yeah, no. You play fantasy football. I play, like what I play is like that step above. And so adding things like this, just constantly changing it, I personally enjoy. Obviously, again, what we're talking here is a potential huge change.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all ideas. So what about if we were to consider something like changing or eliminating even the tenure rule, especially with the lottery kind of loss of a keeper?
And I get it, and yeah, sometimes it sucks when you have somebody that it's like, well, crap, I'm at year 3, I have to get rid of you. Or if you have multiples at year 3, it's like, well, shoot, I don't want to let any of you go. But I like the tenure rule. I think it's a great, fair way to get those rosters mixed up and to kind of put a little shuffle, because you do still have the chance with your franchise tag to keep one.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get rid of the franchise rule, or I'm sorry, the tenure rule, you have people that are never, ever going to get rid of people on their team.
Potentially.
Like you yourself, you wouldn't get rid of Christian McCaffrey or Travis Kelce or Saquon Barkley.
For a couple years, sure.
You would keep them until they turn into crappy people, and then you would let them go. I don't think that's right.
But the only way I'd eliminate the tenure rule is if we were doing something like that. You did have the lottery pick, because if I got to keep Travis Kelce and Saquon and Ezekiel Elliott and Matt Ryan, sure, that's a great squad and it looks great for a year or two. But what if this year I lose Saquon Barkley? What if next year I lose Ezekiel Elliott? Travis Kelce's getting up there in years, and Matt Ryan, whether it's his good year or his bad year, within a year, I could be looking at just Christian McCaffrey and Travis Kelce. Or I could be looking at, I mean, it changes the dynamic of it, just because we wouldn't change it so much so that the only way we'd get rid of tenure is if this kind of, again, lottery style keeper or cut. I mean, it happens because one thing that we do always try, or at least in the back of my mind, I keep whenever I'm formulating a rule for our fantasy, is I always try to keep it NFL relevant. Is the idea that with the franchise tag, there are some players that we keep and we're like, you know what, this is the guy that I'm going to keep forever. This is who I want. These are the people that we're going to retain on our team. We're going to sign contracts for. But then there are those times, which is why a lottery pick might be interesting, is the idea that even though you really want to keep all these guys, maybe they actually want to test free agency. Maybe they're going to go somewhere else. Maybe they're going to do, they don't have to sign that contract. Maybe AJ Green for, the 3rd year in a row does absolutely nothing on my bench. But I mean, and that's his prerogative, right? He just got franchise tagged again, and we'll, I believe, talk about that. He gets franchise tagged, but is he going to play, or is he going to try? Or Le'Veon Bell is a good example, where he sat for an entire year doing nothing, and then he got his contract elsewhere. It'd be the same thing where it's like, when we draw that one, and I would suggest just putting numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on these players that you have as keepers, and then we'd randomly draw at the draft, just pull out of a hat. Well, it looks like Flying Dutchman, you lose player number 3. Who is player number 3? Well, it looks like it's, Tyreek Tyreek Hill this year, and oh, that's too bad, but everything's written down beforehand, and you have, if Tyreek wants a better contract, but the Chiefs aren't willing to pay him, he can walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those are just kind of the thoughts behind that.
I like the idea. I mean, I think adding that new twist, it does completely change the entire environment of the draft, and everybody's, especially if you're talking about not pulling the numbers, they're not having the cut until right beforehand, that's stressful.
You wouldn't know. Yeah, exactly.
But I would probably feel more comfortable going into something like that. Maybe if we, instead of keeping one person of your 6 completely safe, if we kind of baby step it, like let's keep 3, like let's
3 or 4,
safety,
sure.
like 3 or 4, solidify those. I mean, again,
Flip a
obviously
coin.
we all want to keep our 6, but if we could at least lock in 3, then I'd be a little more open to gambling on the other 3. Because I do like the elements. I like that we'd be mixing it up, trying something new. And I would love to have the opportunity to snatch away some of the top players out there.
Yeah.
But that way, I'm kind of, I don't know, giving myself some peace that, okay, worst case scenario, I lose my, one of my favorites. I've still got these others secured.
Sure. No, and that absolutely makes sense.
I guess it's not as risky while still taking a risk.
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. And that, I mean, the nice part about the off season and the canons that we do have is that everything is up for discussion. And anybody who has any ideas, I'd love to hear it. I've only bounced this off a couple teams, and there is a lot of hesitation because it is a huge rule change. But it's just something to think about. If it's not implemented this year, it could be next year. Obviously, some of us up at the top have a little more to lose. Again, with some of the top players. I mean, no, I know you just rolled your eyes at me. No, but I'm being serious. If I wait a year, obviously, especially keeping tenure, I would have to get rid of Saquon or Christian McCaffrey, and it would absolutely change it. Whereas this year, if I were to potentially lose one of them, it would really suck for me. But what if Sean got Ezekiel Elliott?
But nobody wants that.
No,
and one wants Sean
me
to
of
Ezekiel
all people
Elliott.
do not want to lose Ezekiel Elliott. But what if you ended up with Devontae Adams? I wouldn't want, or I mean, and I'm just kind of
it could be really exciting.
Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry all of a sudden's available because he's there. I mean, Alvin Kamara.
Well, and it would definitely bring a new excitement to the draft.
George Kittle.
Hey now.
Russell Wilson, Julian Edelman. I mean, there are any number of guys that could all of a sudden, and you're just like, well, crap. Now, am I going to look at somebody like, am I going to look at Joe Burrow or Tua at number 1 and look towards my future of, even if we did 4 that you're guaranteed and you might lose 1 or 2. I mean, there's a chance that, are you going to look towards a future in your fantasy team, or are you going to look towards the here and now? It's like, well, dang, I didn't expect that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it would also liven up the draft instead of us all sitting there starting right from the get-go, kind of a lackluster group of players to pick from. It would liven it up by, there's some actual talent out there.
Yeah.
Let's go for that.
And at least personally, and we're going to get into keepers here in a second, because I always feel like it's relatively predictable, is that who people are going to keep, what everybody's thinking right off the bat. You knew, like, Julian Edelman this last year was going to be one of the top couple. You're hoping that somebody falls a little further to you in that situation, but it doesn't necessarily happen. But then right off the bat too, you're thinking to yourself, well, am I going to go with a safe bet, or should I be looking at who my rookie is, or what should I do? Now, it does add that element of surprise, which is just something to think about. But those are just thoughts, so just let me know. Again, shoot me a text or leave a comment in one of those YouTube videos, because there are 2 on our channel. Soon to be 3, perhaps more. I do want to make a couple quick announcements. The punishment for 10th place will be handed down here momentarily. We'll be sending that out to Cass, so be prepared. I'm not going to say it's possibly one of the best punishments of all time, but let's be honest. I mean,
payback.
Payback's a bitch. All right. Now, the other thing I do want to announce here real quick is we are looking at date for keepers. The draft date is still in flux. We're looking at potentially mid to early August. It just kind of depends on how everything goes and how everybody can travel, or if anybody can travel. You never know at this point. So, keeper declaration date is set. It is June 28th. June 28th is the keeper deadline. That gives us, what is that, just over 3.5 months to decide your 6 keepers. That gives you time to think about it. But then from that point, if we do need to move the draft into July or move it a little later, again, we're shooting for about mid-August for the draft. It gives us about 6 weeks, gives you time with OTAs, off-season stuff to be able to think about your guys and that sort of thing. But again, keeper deadline, June 28th. All right, for our first guest, we do have the second place finisher from this last season. Congratulations. Deshaun, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Like I told you before, there was no way I was beating your team this season. So, hey, I'm glad I got second.
I don't think anybody was beating me, but hey, you get that prize money.
Hey, I was doing actually okay before Saquon Barkley just decided to take over the world for 1 week.
No, okay. Well, we have you on here specifically to just kind of chat through some of these free agent signings. Obviously, the NFL season has kicked off with all the free agency, and there have been some moves, some trades, some cuts. Let's just kind of jump right in. First of all, to that quarterback position. Obviously, a couple of the big signings. Brady, we'll get to that one here in a little bit, but there's Bridgewater to Carolina, Phillip Rivers to Indy, Colt McCoy to the Giants. I mean, what are your thoughts here looking at this quarterback pool?
People making some desperate plays at this point. I honestly see that as like desperation, especially with the Colts signing like Phillip Rivers. Like at this point, they're just trying to buy themselves time until they can find somebody. It looks like at this point, like I thought Brissett was going to be their guy. They kept talking him up like he was going to be their guy, and then they signed Phillip Rivers. Cool. Vikings with Kirk Cousins, I'm not so sure what's going on with that. I don't know. And the Panthers signed Teddy Bridgewater. I believe that was a fair move. Everybody kind of saw that coming, essentially, because their team is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see if Teddy Bridgewater can, do what he did with the Saints. Oh wait, let's see. He had a whole offense, a coach who tailor-made the offense for him, and a bunch of the best wide receiver in the league last season, a running back that could at least be competent, and the second one who could be competent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see what the Panthers do, especially because they have a new head coach on top of that, right?
Yeah, but they have Christian McCaffrey back there. I feel like any quarterback could just dump it off and.
It could work out because essentially all you have to do is do little dump and shallow passes to Teddy Bridgewater and then to Christian McCaffrey and then all your fast wide receivers that you already have there. So it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Yeah, the other one that I did really want to touch base on specifically was that Marcus Mariota signing over in Las Vegas.
Yep.
You sound really depressed with this. Is there a reason?
Okay.
Here we go.
You went from the Tennessee Titans, who have better wide receivers, better running back, better defense, and you couldn't get it done there, to getting traded to not only the Raiders, who are now moving to Vegas, but to a guy who doesn't believe in quarterbacks whatsoever unless they're over the age of 35. So Mariota has lack of confidence and lack of what seems to be ability, and you're going to trade him to a guy who doesn't care. So that's going to work out super well. Our quarterback room just looks like a bunch of depressed little kids.
But you don't think putting somebody like Mariota behind Derek Carr, you don't think that's going to kickstart him in any way?
Who lost his job to Ryan Tannehill, who came from the Miami Dolphins, who also did shit. Yeah, that's going to help so many people. At this point, you might as well brought in Drew Bledsoe.
It's probably a step up from Carr, but let's take a bet right here. Last season, I did have a bet with Eli. I had said that Derek Carr was going to be put on the bench at some point. Now, there were rumors swirling around that he was done. Clearly, he's still there. At what point this season do you think we'll see Mariota take the field?
Man,
Week 5.
there should be no point. At no point should Mariota take the field over Derek Carr. Like, they are both not that great. But I would always, in any season, take Derek Carr over Mariota. But because of my coach, it'll probably happen in 3 to 4 games at most.
At most. Haley?
At most.
That's roughly what I was thinking. I said more like week 5 at the latest, but
I think he kind of has to have that. I mean, obviously, it's not much of a stretch for Carr to have a losing record, but I think you can't go unless you go 1-3. I mean, 2-3 is probably a little more likely. So right around 5 or 6. I mean, especially in that division. I don't know. I mean, because you got to look at everybody else. Obviously, Denver. I mean, we're not going to touch on that one much, but we do have the LA Chargers. They don't really have a quarterback at this point. Am I right?
All right, Jake. Let me explain something to you. Okay.
Oh gosh.
John Gruden. Remember when it happened when he went to Tampa Bay and he had a good team in Tampa Bay, and then he had a star wide receiver named Keyshawn Johnson, and he decided not to want to, I don't know, get along with the dude at all, and shipped him out, and then shipped out everybody else on that team. And what happened to that team? They became shit. They fired John Gruden. He ended up in the booth. Let's see. After leaving the booth, he comes to Oakland, and what does he do? There is a star, star defensive end that we have on our team. He decides not to want to get along with the guy. He ships him out. Then he starts shipping out everybody else. And what happens? My team is going to start turning into shit. So, knowing John Gruden, especially because you won't even talk about your Denver Broncos, the Chargers don't have a QB. Watch, we're going to lose probably to both of those teams. And Carr will probably sit by week 3. And then he's going to do his rotating door of, hey, we'll start Mariota. No, he didn't do well. Well, then we'll throw back in Derek Carr. Then he didn't do well because, I don't know, both their confidence are shook.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to have a shit season. Hey, but there is that odd hope that somehow Vegas, they get there and all of a sudden they're just great for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the case because, I mean, you say that Gruden's kind of the problem, and I mean, but I mean, if you have a shit team, can you really go up much higher than shit?
I mean,
the Browns were a shit team, and they've,
they're still there.
They're trying.
Yeah, I mean, hey, what? I mean, I can be hopeful, I can be as hopeful as this virus dissipating off the face of the earth or something, but it doesn't look like that's happening either. So, and there's an off chance that the world might end and the football season might not even happen again. So I might get lucky.
Yeah.
That's true. The world might still be on shutdown.
It's getting harder and harder each season to watch these guys play. Man, we started off the season last year actually pretty decently, and then all the things that worked, they decided just to go away from all of those things, and it's cool.
I don't know. We had a new Super Bowl champion, which we'll also discuss in a second. But I do want to just kind of get back to the AFC West because obviously that's a little bit of a sore spot for you, and I like kind of rubbing salt in that wound. But I mean, prediction right now. What do you think their record's going to be at the end of the season?
Ooh, Oakland?
Yes. Not Oakland.
I predicted what their record was going to be last year, and I was actually really wrong. I thought they were only going to have 4 wins, and they upped me by 3 more. They were 7-9, I think, last year. Well, that was an aberration. But the sad part is they could finish off with the same record because of how bad the division actually is, minus the Chiefs.
I mean, I don't know. What kind of a quarterback do you think is going to end up in LA?
Jameis Winston, probably.
Over them trying to trade up and draft somebody? I mean, there are guys like Tua that, even though they have injury they have that injury history kind of hanging over them. You could see him getting picked up at 10, right?
Right. The sad part is, like, I wish teams were smarter, and if the Chargers were a smart organization, they would pull an Andy Reid, get the project, bring in a competent quarterback for at least a season, give your guys confidence, then bring their guy in to start. Your team already has confidence. They give him confidence, and then they can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how the NFL works, and most likely, if they don't get Jameis Winston, they'll go and trade for, get up and get like a Tua, start him, he gets hurt, then they're back where they started.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll definitely see how that one goes. Now, we're going to, again, sticking in the AFC West, we're just going to kind of talk about moves because the next position we're going over to here is running back. And obviously the Denver Broncos just signed Melvin Gordon to a 2-year deal. How much does that affect the division?
The weird thing about that is, like, when I saw the signing, I was like, oh, okay, that's it's a good signing for Melvin at least. At least he gets out of the shadow of that team.
You mean
However, it's like I feel like the Denver Broncos organization, like, you have Phillip Lindsay on your team, and like you watch Phillip Lindsay play, and you're like, man, he should have a shit ton of yards at the end of this game. And then you look at the end of the game stats, and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why don't you guys use him more? Obviously, he's the better back. So that's the same thing that's going to happen when Melvin Gordon gets there, because now they're going to maybe we should have been using Lindsey more. And then all of a sudden now you have this problem. And what if Melvin Gordon just, doesn't fit their system or what they do?
Sure.
But I guess, at the same time, it's a good chance to try out Drew Lock, because now you're going to have a running back that can actually catch it out of the backfield and do all those other things. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, this is true. Moving on to some of the other sections. We've been in this division for a little bit, but what about Jordan Howard went to Miami, McKissick signed in Washington. Those are some of the other big ones. But the biggest of all, at least in my opinion, is Todd Gurley getting cut by the Rams and then turning around and signing with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I love the whole story that, they're like, we're trying to save cap space. We need to sign these other guys, so we're going to cut you if you don't want to make a deal. Yeah, sure.
But wasn't it?
Went to Atlanta, it's if somehow his knee is fine and he's fine,
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good move for him. It's super solid.
Yeah.
Because Matt Ryan puts up numbers. It doesn't matter who his running back is. He will put up numbers, and if you actually can catch out of the backfield, he'll put up bigger numbers, which means you'll get big numbers.
Yeah. The
problem is that the Gurley they're going to get?
Well, a couple things on that one. First one, wasn't Gurley projected to get $20 million this year or something crazy like that in LA? And so
that's LA's fault, not his.
No, it is.
But
that's how all NFL contracts are nowadays. Is they get that nice signing bonus. You have a couple years of okay, and then you have 1 or 2 years that are super back end loaded, and they're like, well, you're done. It just so happened that he's had a year of greatness and then a year off with a terrible knee injury. But I want to kind of posit that against you now. It seems to me that almost every other year, Todd Gurley has had some kind of an issue with his knee or with an injury, where he'll have a great year and then it's not so good. And then it's a great year and then it's not so good. And now we're at the point where he just kind of, had a year off. Looking into now an offense that wants to be able to move the ball, he is the number one back over there in my opinion. And obviously, like you said, with Matt Ryan, you also have Julio taking everything off the top. I feel like, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to stack the box against a 26-year-old Todd Gurley who essentially had a year off, or are you going to let Julio just kind of run rampant over the top of you?
Yeah, but the caveat to that is the only thing I will say about the Rams and the reason I'm giving them shit is own it then. Don't say that it's for cap reasons. Own it. Say that hey, look,
$20 million though.
Healthy. I know, but if he's the guy, if he's your guy, $20 million doesn't matter to you. You know what I mean? Look at what fucking Tampa Bay just did with Tom Brady, giving him $60 million at 43. and yes, I know that's a QB. Yes, and I know blah blah blah. Yes, and all that. But you still have to put in age and all that into consideration, because if they can't protect him, he gets hurt. Blah blah blah. All that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But with Todd Gurley, like, I agree with everything that you said. The only thing is like, is that who they're going to get though? Even though he had a year off, when it comes, especially if he's had lingering issues with that same knee. All it takes is one shot. All it takes is one good hit, or him turning one way or tweaking one way, and then his season is done. And it's like, so it's a risky signing. But if they get to Todd Gurley, on his on year, they're going to have an amazing year, because even if Julio Jones may be slowing down with top end speed, like, I mean, you're still going to double cover the dude. Like, there's no way. I just wish at this point they would have kept Austin Hooper.
Well, we can actually use that as a segue kind of over into the tight end position. And I know we were chatting about it a little bit before we started the recording. Both you and Haley, you might speak to this more, are both a little more high on Austin Hooper. Now, the signing over in Cleveland, correct me if I'm wrong, not necessarily a great thing in comparison to Atlanta, right?
No, he should have stayed on the Falcons, I think, especially with all of this. Because if Gurley does have a good year and Hooper does stay kind of at the top of his game, I think the Falcons would have had a fair shot at making it back to the Super Bowl. But I don't know how well the Browns will do for him.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, Austin Hooper, like, I get where, like, again, when I think about it a little bit more, Jake, I get where your argument comes in, where he's like, you don't see as tight end, like a top tier tight end, because like he's a very in between the numbers kind of tight end. That's where he gets all his chunk plays. That's where he gets his touchdowns. Is usually, if you look at him, he never gets a touchdown on the edges or the fringes.
Sure.
And that's kind of where the Browns made their money with Njoku. Is the same thing inside the numbers. So I get why they went after him. However, you go from a quarterback who can't throw the ball accurately all the time out of nowhere from Matt Ryan, who literally throws the ball more than almost anybody. So like, of course his numbers are going to deplete and diminish, and it's like, and especially if you got Todd Gurley, like, I don't know, if I was Hooper, like, yeah, the money is great and everything, but like, man, you could have done something. You could have done something there. Like, it is a perfect fit for you. The system was great for you. Like, you didn't even have to do a whole lot. Just kind of post up and catch the ball.
Well, I mean, I just want to kind of compare this last season. Austin Hooper was our 6th-ranked tight end, sitting at about 160 points. Obviously, right around him was Jared Cook and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz had a little bit of a down year in comparison to previous, but Mark Andrews was 26 points above where Austin Hooper was. Obviously, his touchdown, he had a lot of touchdowns. Waller was up there. Kittle was above him. Travis Kelce. I mean, it almost seems like he was at the edge of being a top-tier tight end in Atlanta.
Right, but you also got to take into account that he missed how many games this season? 2 or 3? With that knee injury that he suffered. So the fact that he's still tight end 6 is actually pretty good. And the fact that, like, Mark Andrews only 26 points above him with 3 games missed is still pretty good.
Sure. And, I mean, obviously he did have but it was just a couple chunk plays. If you're looking at, obviously, right when you needed somebody like Hooper in the middle of the season when he was down, I mean, he was out, week 9, week 11, week 12, week 13, and then 14 and 15 right at the playoffs. That's kind of right when you need the guy. I mean, but you're comparing.
But it's not like you're talking. But again, Jake, it's not like you're talking about like a wide receiver position, running back position, or QB position. Especially in fantasy football, tight ends are hard to come by. So even if you did get like Austin Hooper at 6, you're going to be happy with that rather than what you could have had.
But that's what I'm saying is you're not going to get him there in Cleveland. He took this opportunity. No. Had he even played a full season, I'm saying he would have had the chance to have been better than number 6. He would have been in the conversation for a top potentially 3 tight end going into this next year in Atlanta. But he took the money. He went because he is just a middling tight end, and we won't see much better than heck. If he breaks the top 10 this year, I'll be surprised, especially in Cleveland.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. Like I don't know. I don't know what the Browns are doing, what they're planning on doing. Like I don't know. They have too much going on, and like there's too much noise there. Like for it to like he would have to be like I don't know, for Austin Hooper to have like a good season, he would have to just like become like invisible to the defenses and just like always be open. Like he would always have to be like wide open.
Whoa, wait a second. You're saying take Odell Beckham's job? I don't know how you can do that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's like that's what I'm saying. Like literally, that's literally why I'm saying this is because he would literally have to be wide open in the middle of the field, literally screaming at Baker for him to throw the ball. Like
Yeah, I don't know.
Between Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham, like nobody else is getting the goddamn ball.
I mean, outside of Jarvis, I don't know that anybody's getting the dang ball because you again, Odell could stand there in the middle of the field and you could throw it right at his hands. Dude, it's going to drop it.
That's fair, but to be fair, they're still going to try to throw it to him 12 times. He's going to catch it twice.
If that.
You know.
All right. Now, moving on. Some of these other signings, before we get too bogged down with Cleveland there, we could go all day on that.
All day.
Jimmy Graham, you mentioned it before we started recording. I
don't know how he's making money.
He got paid again. He's in Chicago now. Now, I do want to say Nick Foles did get traded to Chicago.
Right.
I mean, he's a great tight end. I know Trubisky was kind of the guy that they were hoping for over there. Hopefully they see Nick Foles. Does that boost Jimmy Graham in any way?
Not even this is how much it boosts Jimmy Graham. Eric Ebron signed to the Steelers, and that's a good one that we should actually talk about rather than Jimmy Graham, because Jimmy Graham at this point is literally just going, hey, remember when I used to be good? And then they put him in somewhere that is cold. When he was here in Seattle and doing the same thing, it didn't really work out well. And then they're going to be having him block a lot because Trubisky is Trubisky, and Jimmy Graham doesn't block well, but he also doesn't catch well. He also doesn't run well. He also doesn't do anything well. So he's just going to be there and doing the exact same thing he was probably doing in Seattle, which is, hey, when we get into the red zone, we need you to stand on the goal line and pretend like you can catch.
Sure. But I do want to actually bump over to Ebron now. You mentioned Pittsburgh here. I agree that is a good signing.
Well, yeah, and Roethlisberger loves his tight ends, so.
And
he does love his tight ends.
And now he's potentially healthy, right?
Potentially.
Well, yeah,
the reason I say it's a good signing is because it's at least another threat to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So with like the receivers like Juju and those guys, like they're smaller guys, but like they can do really good work when they can get the ball. But the problem is like with Juju, like he's never been a number one, so like he's getting those double teams and he's not being able to get open. But like, if Eric Ebron actually shows up and Ben like trusts him and gets him the ball,
mm-hmm.
when Eric Ebron decides to want to catch the ball, like he's a fairly good tight end, which will open up so much space for the other little guys that they got. But it's a what if. It's a what if.
That's still a good call, though.
No, I think it was a good call. He's solid. Like he wasn't going to get used really much in Indy.
Yeah.
Because they already have the other guy that was getting the passes.
Doyle and
So it was a good move on his part too to get out of there, because like what is he going to do over there with another good tight end? Or decent, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So now those are kind of all the tight ends really that we that have moved anywhere. We are going to move on to wide receiver, and I think that one of the biggest moves happened at wide receiver. But before we do that one, there are a couple I do want to just quick touch base on. Obviously, Amari Cooper has re-signed 5 years. He is in Dallas for the foreseeable future, but they were only able to franchise tag Dak. How much? Thoughts?
The Amari Cooper signing is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If I was them, I would have probably because they at the time doesn't teams have 2 franchise tags, right?
No, you only get 1 franchise tag.
I thought it was 2, and then like the CBA came in and took 1 away or something. Okay. Yeah.
In recent memory, I can only recall 1. You might be thinking the transition tag, but I don't know if you can do both in the same year. I'd have to look that up.
Right. If anything, I think they would. If anything, I think that if you can put a transition tag on the QB, I would have put it on Dak, and then put the franchise tag on Amari. Only because like the way Amari's season ended last year is like it was reminiscent of what the Raiders did too. Like he kind of he started off really well, really strong, But if you look at his numbers when he's playing at home, he's fantastic. But then as soon as he gets away, he becomes almost nothing. And then he was shut down by 2 separate corners last season, both of which I'm aware of because I got 0 points both games. So it's like they give him $100 million, and it's like, okay, like Amari, are you going to live up to this contract?
Yeah.
Like, we've seen what happens when Dallas pays other people. They sure don't.
I mean, Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, I'm not speaking from experience being a championship team or anything, but he did contribute.
He did contribute, yes, but he wasn't the best running back on your team, even though he just signed that big contract, right?
Yeah, no, he was the second best running back on my team of 3 greats.
Hey, but even then, still being number 2 out of 3 after you signing the biggest deal that you've ever gotten is not a good look. Like, you should always be striving to be number 1, since you're getting paid like a number 1.
Yeah, but he's still a Cowboy, so I don't know that that's... All right, other wide receivers. Obviously, Stephon Diggs got traded. He is now in Buffalo.
He was complaining being in Minnesota. Now he's in Buffalo. Yeah, good luck, dude.
Yeah, that's not really... Other one, AJ Green did get the franchise tag. Do we actually think we're going to see him this year?
No.
He might try. If I was him, I would try because, like, obviously you got franchise tagged by the Bengals. Like, they can franchise tag you again for, 2 seasons in a row, right? At least.
Mm-hmm.
If I was him, I would try because, like, this is going to be your career after the Bengals. This is what you're doing now. You're now playing for your career after the Bengals.
Yeah. Which might not be much because he's old and...
Yeah, on his way out. If anything, you'll get 1 good year from him, and that's it.
Well, I mean, like, what is it? Chris Carter always said, you never trust a wide receiver with bad feet.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I wouldn't trust many wide receivers with bad feet.
Well, but, I mean, that's what AJ Green has. He has bad feet. Every time he gets hurt, it's always a foot thing.
Yeah. It's also part of that, too, is, I mean, when he did kind of re-injure his feet constantly was when he was trying to come back, and it was that contract year, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm trying to get back, and they're like, well, hurry up, and I don't know. It seems to me like he's just put him somewhere else, maybe opposite Odell and Jarvis and Hooper, and we'll see. The biggest wide receiver move of the season so far, and it has, I think, the biggest fantasy implications, is obviously DeAndre Hopkins was traded by the Texans in exchange for David Hurt all the time Johnson. He's now on the Arizona Cardinals next to Larry Legend and Christian Kirk, and I don't ever remember the other rookie who's the up-and-comer, but they're stacked now. What happens for fantasy? What happens in the NFC West? All that.
Man, NFC West is going to be interesting. It depends on what Seattle's defense looks like. Because their offense looks like it's going to be okay, surprisingly. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. But the defense, we'll see. The Rams, we're going to find out what kind of team they are because now it's literally Jared Goff or bust. And then with the Cardinals, it's going to be interesting because they're going to come out like they didn't, Kingsbury did in college with the spread, but it's not awful because it's really good for the young wide receiver core because you're going to have a guy like Larry Legend in there and DeAndre Hopkins who both work harder than any other wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is a receiver who can get 1,000 yards, doesn't matter who's throwing it to him, which we saw in Texans when he had Brandon Weeden and some other random throwing him the ball, and he still got over 1,000 yards. So the fact that I actually think it's going to be a good move for him. Because one of the things with the Texans is they had a lot of over-the-top help, so he wasn't getting as many targets. Well, they're going to have 2 guys that are going to be over the top, but they're going to be young and inexperienced while you have him and Larry working the whole rest of the field. I feel like he's going to get a lot of good passes, especially because Kyler Murray is still small, so he's going to be doing a lot of intermediate stuff, I feel like, and that's right where DeAndre Hopkins feasts. At the same time, there's also the counter to that where that's also where Larry Fitzgerald feasts. And if everybody's looking at DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald now looks a little bit better because he at least can still catch it. He's not as fast, but he can still catch it.
Yeah. And, I mean, you are correct. Looking at Hopkins from this last season, he did have only one 40-yard reception that was a touchdown. I mean, and that's not much comparison to guys like Diggs or Brown or Evans even. I mean, some of these guys were a little more over the top, but...
but if you look at it, DeAndre Hopkins' years, like, he's never really been that guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's never been like, oh, I'm going to burn you, I'm going to go for the 60-yard touchdown. It's more of like, he will get it, but it's because he caught the ball 15 yards in the field, did a weird spin move, broke away from you, and then got to the touchdown.
Yeah.
You know?
But, I mean, on the other side of this, though, obviously you know, Hopkins, like you mentioned, he's had a lot of 1,000-yard seasons with whoever's throwing him the ball. Is that sustainable? I mean, this last season he had 1,165 yards. Larry Fitzgerald had, you know, over 700. Is it going to be sustainable again? I like Christian Kirk. He had over 700 yards. I mean, is that possible? I don't know if that's going to be sustainable unless it is. I mean, let's talk defenses around the NFC West. You said Seattle might actually have something. I always disagree with that one because I don't think the defense will ever be as good as it was.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I said the offense looks like it's fine. I said the defense, we're going to find out what it's going to be because, like, we don't know. Like, they gave up...
It'll be trash.
You're right. They gave up, like, the most yardage, or some of the most yardage in points last year until, like, the end where they kind of finally started getting together. Like, they had takeaways, but they didn't... Yeah, well, it was weird. It was a weird season for their defense.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the reason, like, it might be sustainable with Arizona is because they don't have a defense either. It's the same concept. Like, they had to put up, like, 35 points or more to win any game last season. And it's going to be looking kind of like the same. They did a bunch of, you know, they haven't done a whole bunch of moves defensively. And then on top of that, like, if Hopkins has the room to run, like, if he just has the room, if he has a one-on-one, he's going to beat that dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his hands are still good. Like, he's just not as fast. So it's like, just give him the targets. All he needs is the targets. We'll find out in 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of the season, based on his targets, like, is it going to be sustainable or not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're looking just defense again for that, I mean, what about like San Francisco? I mean, I know they were in the Super Bowl, and generally when you hit the Super Bowl the next season, you're a little picked apart. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's only so much that Fitzgerald and Hopkins can do against, I mean, you know.
Right. But I'm gonna put it this way. It's the same thing that I said before with the 49ers. Like, everybody was, like, super high on the defense.
Mm-hmm.
And all I said was, like, get past that front four, you're fine. Because nobody else can name who are their corners, who are their safeties. Nobody knows their names besides Richard Sherman. It's like, if you can get past that pressure just for a couple seconds, like, you can throw the ball all day. Like, it's just, you have to get past it. So if Kyler Murray can somehow get out of, like, the arms of, like, you know, Bosa and all those guys, like, they're going to be running down the field essentially wide open because, like, DeAndre Hopkins can beat Richard Sherman on one-on-one. It's been proven before. And then you're going to have Larry Fitzgerald on, like, a second corner who you don't even know the name of, plus these two fast dudes on the edges who you're going to be getting against, like, third and fourth corners and maybe a safety. Like, yeah. Christian Kirk is actually developing into, like, a pretty good wide receiver, like, route running wise. But it's like, it's going to depend on, like, what the kind of routes they give him.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And obviously, I mean, what is it? Kenyon Drake has that transition tag over there. So, I mean, we'll just kind of have to see how that one plays out. But I do believe that one has the biggest fantasy implications because now Deshaun Watson's value, I feel like, drops. And I mean, again, Kyler Murray's, I feel like his goes up a little bit. The defenses in the NFC, I don't know. It's up in the air. But
I don't even know why the Texans made that trade, dude. Like, I don't.
But they got David Johnson.
Right. And didn't they get the other running back from Cardinals too the season before?
Who?
God, who was the other dude? Who was their other running back? The Texans. They traded for one at the beginning, like, middle of the season. Oh no, they got it from the Browns. Never mind.
Oh yeah.
So they just got another same guy.
Mm-hmm. Same
they
kind
just keep getting the same kind of running back, and it's not working. Like, I don't know what they're thinking. I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand the team. Like, I feel so bad for Deshaun Watson. Like, I know it's tangent. I know I'm not supposed to do it, but Deshaun Watson, I'm sorry, dude. Quit. Like, retire, and then come back after a season and go to a better team.
Pull a Marshawn.
Yeah, you could request a trade to the Chargers, but they probably won't pay him. So, all right. Any other free agent or noticeable moves that we want to chat here before we move on to our next caller?
Let me look here. I don't know. It's weird. Like, the Eagles traded for Darius Slay. How do you feel about that?
You know, you brought him up for a reason. What do you got?
I like Darius Slay. I think it's interesting that the Eagles are trying to, like, retool as much as they are.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a good move for them, especially because, like, you know, Darius Slay wasn't doing shit in Detroit.
Yeah.
Sorry for cussing so much, by the way, in this. I apologize. I didn't realize it until about right now.
I forgive you.
And then I just think it's interesting. And then real quick, the last one I want to ask about is, what do you think? How long do you think it is before Nick Foles becomes the starter of the Bears?
You know, if Nick Foles' history has anything to be said, he should probably stay the backup for, like, the first 8 games. That way he can come in and bring him to the playoffs and have this weird playoff run that everybody's afraid of. If they throw him in too soon and he's the starter, he'll just do terrible. He'll disappoint. He'll probably break his collarbone again, or something will happen. And
yeah, I feel bad for the dude, kind of, for the collarbone thing. That was just freak luck.
It's bad luck. I mean, it happens. He got that touchdown, but at the sacrifice of, you know, the season and potentially a career. I mean, because now he's in Chicago having to play against the Purple People Eaters and Aaron Rodgers. Granted, they do kind of get 2 byes against the Lions, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I said that was my last question, but I just thought of another one real fast.
Shoot.
How long do you think Minshew Mania lasts again this season?
Not long.
Why?
Not long.
I think he worked up a hype, and it fizzled out.
Didn't he have... How many wins did Minshew have last season?
You know what?
Gardner Minshew had 340 fantasy points last year, 3,200 yards, and it looks like... Oh, I lost it. 21 touchdowns.
He actually did pretty good.
He actually did really well. To kind of put it in perspective, Ryan Tannehill had 2,700 yards and 22 touchdowns. Andy Dalton was below him. Brissett was below him. Baker Mayfield did just slightly better with just more yards and obviously considerably more interceptions. But he's right in that ballpark, technically, of Ryan Tannehill, Drew Brees, surprisingly Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo. These are kind of some of the names that you're looking at when you get Minshew. But I mean, let's do some, like, backup, because I know Drew Brees signed a 2-year extension here. That's one that I don't think we mentioned. But if you're looking for, if you have your starters, obviously you have guys like Jackson, Prescott, Mahomes, Ryan. Now I believe Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers. Those are your kind of go-to starters, right? Guys like Phillip Rivers, is he considerable as a backup, as a bench warmer quarterback, just in case something happens?
I'm gonna say yes with Phillip Rivers because it's Phillip Rivers.
What about
no matter what happens, like, it's Phillip Rivers.
Jared Goff.
Like and the Colts have. Oh wait, they have T.Y. Hilton still, right?
They do, but okay. So then we're just gonna keep going. What about guys right around the same spot? Tom Brady's right in that area. Is he good backup? Do you hope that Evans and everybody over there kind of boosts Tom Brady?
Yeah, he's probably safe.
Okay, Tom Brady's got exactly what he wants. Like,
he got paid. What about
he got paid, but, like, at the same time, the Bucs team isn't bad. Like, that's the thing. If you take away the 30 interceptions Jameis Winston had, he still had 30 touchdowns, and that team was solid. until everybody started getting hurt at the end of the season. So Tom Brady might have a good season. You never know. It just depends on his arm, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know that he will, but the next caller is waiting for that one. We'll touch that one. A couple more quick fire ones. Jared Goff, backup quarterback, worth it or not?
Yes.
We know your
That's
opinion.
Boom or bust. I'm saying no.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yes.
Wow, Haley.
Yeah, dude, it's the look. There were so many times. She gets the guys that she's like. Okay, come on. Your three quarterbacks for the last several seasons have been Aaron Rodgers, who's a looker. Let's be honest. Jared Goff, who. I mean, he looks like, what's his name from The Notebook? And then Jimmy G, Mr. Handsome himself. Like, it's all about the look with quarterback.
Quarterbacks. It has nothing to do with their look.
I mean, looking at it, they're actually worse than Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston. And actually, Derek Carr is. But, all right, what about Ryan Fitzpatrick?
You know, Ryan Fitzpatrick has a special place in my heart. He really does, because like he does some cool stuff. He's just an old man out there playing football, man. He enjoys it.
He's an old man version of Gardner Minshew. What about like Tannehill?
But he loves it. But you can tell he's having fun. He doesn't even care. You know, he's just like he's happy he's getting a contract. He's happy he's getting to go to football. Like it's. I actually like watching Ryan Fitzpatrick play half the time, to be honest. All right, you need to get off his nuts now. These were supposed to be rapid fire questions, man. We're going rapid fire, and you're just all over them.
And I'm the one with the boner for everyone.
Yeah, well,
what?
Deshaun
Magic saved my career, like saved my playoff team for a little while. Okay.
Yeah.
which season? All right. Anyways, on that note, sir, I do appreciate you chatting with us here. We do gotta get on to the next one, but
okay.
Look forward to you yet again somehow managing to scrape together a couple free agents next season and making the playoffs. So congratulations on third place in advance. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. At least I'm still placing, so that's all that matters to me.
Was that a dig at Haley or?
That's a dig at everybody who always gives me shit. Like, yes, I don't win in the league, but at least I make the playoffs every year.
Didn't I get third? Yeah, I got.
Oh, I didn't realize it. We have third, second, and first on this talk. Wow, this is great. All right, Deshaun, thanks so much for chatting with us here.
No problem.
All right, so we are here now with our second caller. I have the Flying Dutchman on the line here. How are you doing today, sir?
Not doing too badly, calling in from the undisclosed location in eastern Oregon in the VB Pork and Poultry bunker, waiting for the apocalypse to take full swing here.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure to get you on, obviously, we just chatted with Boomer Busters about a lot of just all the crazy offseason moves, and it has been a crazy start to the free agency. But one in particular, and you kind of had ranted about it earlier in the season, and I wanted to make sure to touch base, as you had talked about Tom Brady. And now he's signed to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2-year deal, $50+ million guaranteed with no trade clause, no tag clause, bunch of craziness in there. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Here's what I've got for you. Listen really carefully here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that is?
Oh, jeez.
That is the sound of a goat crying for its mommy. And that's what Brady is going to be doing here very shortly. Sean, anybody else, I will tell you, I will lay it out there. I will bet that Brady will be injured, benched, or retired by the middle of this next season.
Wow.
Retired by the middle, huh?
You don't even think he'd stick
or
around
injured,
longer?
more likely injured. Here's the thing. Brady is going to be shown for the farce that he is As I said earlier in the season, any mediocre quarterback could have done just fine at the Patriots. And we're going to find that out here shortly in next season when they pick up a quarterback. They're not worried about who they're going to put in at quarterback. Have you noticed that? Have you seen there's no big scramble for Belichick or Kraft to find another quarterback? They're like, geez, I could put Willy Wonka back there and we'd have just as many wins. Here's the thing. Last year, the Patriots' offensive line was third in protection of the quarterback. Tampa Bay's was 22. The only reason why Winston survived is because he could run. And we know Brady can't run. He will be dead by game 9 this year. He is going to get beat up so bad. And the truth is, statistically, Brady had a lousy year last year. As a matter of fact, he was worse than Winston. Not Wilson, of course. You know, in fantasy points last year, Winston was number 3. Brady was number 12. Fantasy points per game, Winston was 5. Brady was 16. Completions, Brady 370, Winston 380. And you know what? Winston only took 10 more attempts. And their completion percentages were dead on, 60.7, 60.8, and Winston had 1,000 yards more on all of that than Brady. What in the heck are they thinking? Brady seems to think he can prove that he is a Peyton Manning or something, that he can go someplace else and take a team to the Super Bowl. What we're going to find out is that he is nothing. The truth is, New England, the owner, Kraft, Belichick, they're all criminals. And they have stolen all of these championships. The only thing that worked for them was Brady went right along with it, Inflategate. But Kraft, you know what? I would not be surprised if they don't find out that Kraft is responsible for the coronavirus. I mean, think about it. If you go shopping, you find nothing on the shelves. Everybody's buying all the packaged canned goods like Kraft macaroni and cheese. Sounds suspicious? They're rolling in the dough during all of this. Don't get me started. Brady sucks. He is not the only GOAT he is going to be is the GOAT who is blamed for crashing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers completely, bankrupting them and leaving them with nothing.
One would almost argue that Tampa Bay has more. Mike Evans, I would probably say, is a better receiver than Julian Edelman. Chris Godwin had a good year this last year. You don't think even with the kind of talent that he has down there, maybe change the way that instead of doing those longer passes that Winston was throwing up with a prayer, Brady's going to have them just running across the middle a la Belichick system?
You know what? Here's the truth. On all of the incompletions, the poor completion percentage, you know what they're blaming that on in New England? They're saying it was all the dropped passes, that their receivers had a terrible year with dropped passes. Now, you know, you're right. There's more receiver potential there in Tampa Bay right now. But the truth is, if your quarterback throws lame ducks or whatever else, they're going to have a heck of a time catching it. You know, something else to that effect is that he's going to have to figure out how to juice up those receivers. Again, you know, Gronkowski. You know, Tanner, I'm sorry, but Gronkowski, how many times did he get suspended for PEDs? You know, cheaters. That's what it comes down to. I'm afraid that Tampa Bay is not going to be able to live up to that level of diabolical deception to pull off a winning team with this.
So I have a question on that one too, just because I know you have your theory here. Another debatable all-time great, Kurt Warner, played for the Arizona Cardinals. He came back the second half of his career and kind of went off. Now, the coach that Brady will be under in Tampa Bay is going to be Bruce Arians. He's kind of a quarterback savant in a way.
Yep.
You don't think that there's going to be any sort of resurgence? I mean, with the secondary team in that respect?
Yeah, you know what? I do respect that, and Kurt Warner is actually one of my heroes, and I do agree. The thing is, you've got to have something to work with, and take it from the old man who tore his hamstring the second play of the League of Shadows flag football game, that when you get to a certain age, there is no go switch. Your brain says, okay, we can do this, and your body just laughs at you, and you end up like laying on the ground going, what just happened? I used to be able to do this. And there is one running play, I wish I had it on tape, where last year where Brady tried to run out to the left. He went to pick up a first down, and I tell you what, my grandma, God rest her soul, could have run faster than him. And, I don't care unless Arians has some sort of potion to turn back the clock 20 years. Brady, he had some skills. But age catches up with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The new GOAT, as I predicted, the new GOAT is Patrick Mahomes. And I am even more impressed with that fella than I was before I predicted he would win the Super Bowl, if you remember. He is still humble. I am really surprised. He reminds me of a young Russell Wilson. He's not a Brady where he's smug. He actually has some humility. Manning, Peyton Manning was a pretty humble guy. He was a team player, but I would put Mahomes in that category. Brady is way down the list after people like Wilson, and you talk Roger Staubach or Kurt Warner or Peyton Manning. Those are guys with some character.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually pulled up a couple quarterbacks here who played for multiple teams just to kind of compare. Obviously, Peyton Manning is the only quarterback to actually win Super Bowls with two different franchises. Kurt Warner would have been one of the next closest. There was Joe Montana. He played for the Chiefs right at the end of his career. Warren Moon was another great that was kind of all over the place, though he doesn't have the rings to back it up. But then there's the other side of it. You have guys like Brett Favre, who kind of went all over the place, or Dan Marino, who just never really got there and just kind of ended the career, like you mentioned, just throwing ducks. I mean,
right?
You think somebody like Brady's going to be more the Brett Favre, just kind of journeyman right at the end, just seeing who can pay him? Or, I mean...
Well, and you know what? You're right in that you named several people that just went on a little too long. Although I think Montana still had it when he went to Kansas City. But Favre, he hung on too long. And yet he came within one interception of taking the Vikings to the Super Bowl. And, that's no small feat, all things considered. And that was when he was done. Mm-hmm. And yet he got them that close that year. So, Favre was pathetic in how long he hung on. But, come on, look at when you've got the sentimentality, although Kraft and Belichick are not sentimental individuals by any means, but when you have the sentimentality that, New England has had for Brady, he's got to get a clue. They didn't want him. Everybody, everywhere he wanted to go, they didn't want him. Whether it was Las Vegas or San Francisco, they didn't want him. You look at the quarterbacks that those teams kept instead. Garoppolo, okay, I'm sorry, Haley. I know you like Garoppolo. But you know what? Supposedly, he's no Tom Brady, but they didn't want him. Anyway, that is my rant for today.
That's all you have for us? I was actually going to ask, though, too, I mean, how much of it is, I mean, kind of shooting for that, I mean, trying to end on some kind of a good note with the way Belichick and Kraft have let the Patriots kind of go. I mean, they've kind of scraped together the last couple seasons.
Yep,
but
definitely.
I mean, there are guys like Brett Favre that are always kind of chasing that glory with only a few. With again, Kurt Warner, Peyton Manning ended on top with. I mean, he that last season wasn't the greatest. He kind of had that defense there to carry him. But I mean, you remember going out. I mean, especially with your team, you remember going out on top. He finished with the Super Bowl. Warner finished with the Super Bowl. John Elway finished winning a Super Bowl. I mean, is that something somebody like Brady should have done? I mean, I would even argue that, I mean, Drew Brees is still chasing that final, get that final Super Bowl in. Should Brady have just then retired back when they did win the Super Bowl, or what are your thoughts there?
Absolutely. What in the heck do these guys really think they're going to gain? I mean, okay, $30 million a year, I'd let people take me down all day long for $30 million a year. But at the same time, they have some sort of pride and self-respect. You're right. Breeze, he's 41 now this coming season? He should have gone out. Well, how many years ago did they win the Super Bowl? 3, 4?
Oh, it was longer than that.
It was perfect. I mean, he had his kids on the field. It was fantastic for New Orleans. That should have been it. You're right. Brady should have gone with the last Super Bowl win and said, hey, I'm done. I'm on top. Now you can call me the greatest of all time. But no, this is, I guess it's vanity. But
or how much of it's trying to separate the him from Belichick, or how much of it's trying to
it could be that Brady believes his own hype, that he thinks he really is that good, and that he thinks if he walks away from New England, he will show everybody that it was him, it wasn't them. But if he was going to do that, he should have done that 10 years ago, not now.
As opposed to, and I believe you had mentioned it to me first, what was Tom Brady's final play as a New England Patriot?
Oh, absolutely. His last play as a New England Patriot was a pick six. And here, Tampa Bay, here we come. You are going to be begging. You're going to be begging Winston to come back and start. I might just end up keeping Winston as one of my keepers. I'm not promising anything here, but I don't think Brady's going to make it halfway through the season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you don't think there's going to be another team that necessarily goes after Jameis Winston now that he's kind of free? I know there's like the Chargers that still need a quarterback, and there's been debate whether they trade up for a guy like Tua, or you think they leave Winston on the bench to learn from Brady, or how do they approach that?
I think it would be hilarious if the Patriots would pick him up, because, like I said, you had the number 3 offensive line that was protecting Brady. You had the number 22 offensive line protecting Winston. He might have been able to settle down and throw a few more completions, or at least not throw stupid interceptions if he had a line. I think it would be hilarious for Belichick to pick up Winston and show Brady that, hey, I can do this with the guy that they threw away.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I have to ask you, what about Gurley? I can't believe they just let Gurley go.
Yeah.
I'm very mixed about this.
What was that?
I have mixed feelings about this.
I'll bet.
I did like him on the Rams, but I think that there's a lot of potential with him on the Falcons. assuming he passes his physical and everything. But, I mean, you don't know. With Matt Ryan, I think there's potential for some greatness, assuming he's healthy. But, I mean, he's getting up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we did chat with Deshaun a little bit. I mean, it is sad the fact that his knee is kind of been his downfall, but like I mentioned to Deshaun earlier, hasn't Gurley kind of had that 1 year on, 1 year off kind of situation where he kind of has it's a bum year and then a great year and then a bum year, and I mean, maybe this year with Ryan he can. I mean, especially checking it to Julio. I mean, most of all with Julio, if he can pull the top off that offense, which he's absolutely capable of, maybe it opens up that box for Gurley, and they don't need to push him as hard as they had to in L.A.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that they already let Devontae go, they obviously were looking to fill a hole there, and they have had a lot more success with their running backs. So I think you may be right. He may have a little more cover just with the variety of talent there, that he may have the opportunity to be more opportunistic rather than the workhorse.
Sure. Well, and I mean, especially with back to LA, I mean, when Gurley was there, it was one that while he was, I mean, especially in their Super Bowl run, when you knew he was on the field, he was one that everything flowed through that play action, Jared Goff being able to pull it off of Gurley to be able to throw 15 yards. But then once they got rid of that, I mean, now you don't need, I mean, Gurley could be in there for who knows how many plays in Atlanta and not need that. And, Julio might just be that key, having that number one threat over the top.
Right. Yeah, I do. I think that's a real possibility for him. I hope it works for Gurley, because I do like him, and I feel sorry for him with the, it's one thing when your body breaks down at 43. It's another thing when you're still young and it's something that's genetic or whatever, and it's not really what we in life would call fair, but that's also the way it goes.
All right. Well, do you have anything else that you do want to add? I know we're about to jump into keepers here with Haley. She's got some stuff on that, but is there anything that you want to throw out here as we look towards the keeper deadline and all that good stuff?
Wow, I think the keepers are a mess this year. I mean, as far as when is this all going to shake out so that you even know if your quarterback's going to be replaced with a Brady or what? But
sure.
And then there's just the insanity. Stephon Diggs leaving Minnesota, and it's like, well, now I don't know that does the Vikings any good, because then you're depending even more so on
Adam Thielen.
There you go, Thielen. And I think that's going to hurt them a whole lot more. And it's not going to prove anything for Diggs. But the league's gone a little nuts. And who knows? Maybe the entire season will get canceled this year because of the virus.
You're right. I mean, they did say Sean Payton did just get he got the positive for the coronavirus. So. Oh, my gosh, really? Yeah. And then another one, actually. Odell Beckham actually it's been proven yet again that he tested positive for being complete trash. So.
Yeah. Well, that test needs to be conducted a little more frequently.
Yeah. But we'll see how this season goes. But, sir, I do appreciate you chatting with us here, and we're going to jump into keepers with Haley and go from there. All right?
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else. This is a good way to at least keep things going during the off season a little bit. Yes. Sean, I'm serious about that bet, so you let me know.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
All right. Now we are going to jump into keepers, and part of the reason I wanted to have you on this one was because we had been talking about what the potential was for keepers, what we were thinking, Obviously, there are some that are going to get kept, right? There are guys like Patrick Mahomes, you assume, well, he's not really going to move on. But there were some that you were bringing up to me that we wanted to touch base on, looking at each of these teams. What are some moves that you think should happen? What do you think are some keepers that should be kept or shouldn't be kept? Let's start with just one of the teams. Let's start with Dark Knights, because I'm sitting right here.
Yeah.
Obviously, Christian McCaffrey's at year 3. Matt Ryan's at year 3. Matt Ryan is one of those top potential quarterbacks. Am I right?
Yeah, especially with some of the new people that are on the Falcons now. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think that they could have a really great year. And
so let me actually ask you with this one. I know who I'm going to keep, but I'm just looking at some of these wide receivers. There's Cooper Kupp, who is hit or miss. There's Tyler Boyd, who's the main one. It just depending on his quarterback, there might be something there. There's also guys like Deebo Samuel, Anthony Miller, AJ Green, Marvin Jones. These are some of the wide receivers. Like, are some of these going to be worth a keep, or is it just going to be a running back heavy squad going into the keeper season?
I'd say for you should probably stick to your running backs.
Well, obviously, none of them are going to supersede Saquon, but I mean,
I think there's just a lot of uncertainty with the wide receivers on your team. I mean, if you wanted to go and keep like Cooper Kupp, then that would probably be okay. But maybe Deebo Samuel was kind of all over the place. But I don't really think the wide receivers are what's going to be saving you or taking you for another year. I don't think the wide receivers are going to be what makes your team.
Okay, so let's move on into the Boomer Busters. They're the next team on our list. Obviously, he's keeping guys like Mahomes, Adams, probably Brown, Andrews. What about Amari Cooper? We just talked with Deshaun about the fact that he signed a deal. I mean, would you keep Emmanuel Sanders, who doesn't necessarily have a contract yet, or Amari Cooper, who you know is throwing him the ball for a year?
You know, I have mixed feelings on Emmanuel Sanders. He's just so hit or miss. He is getting old, and so will probably end up being a little bit more of a miss. But when he does well and actually shows up, you definitely take notice. And so I'd like to hope that he has another year or two in him, but you can't ever tell.
Yeah. So
Amari Cooper could be a safe bet with that, just because he is younger and has more time on his hand to kind of really keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it just depends. You never really know who's going to show up.
Was there anybody in particular that you had been looking at with some of these keepers that, I mean, what are your thoughts? Go.
Well, I think for Zach's team, it's going to be whether to keep Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was a top quarterback last year, having a great season, but Kyler Murray is pretty hot down there, and he's going to keep, don't give me that look, not that kind of hot, but I think he's got a huge career ahead of him, and I think he's just starting off to where it could be smart to kind of keep him under your wing and just kind of watch his career flourish.
This one, I mean, that one does have a lot of fantasy implications, whether you're keeping Kyler Murray in the air raid offense, especially with all the moves that have been happening. But Lamar Jackson, like you said, was the number one quarterback this last season. Right. I mean, is it something,
can he duplicate it, or was it just a one-off?
I don't think it was a one-off, but I mean, the running quarterback does kind of have that shelf life that you're not really sure. Once you figure out that Lamar Jackson has a bunch of designed runs to the left, I mean, once you figure that out, obviously teams like the Tennessee Titans were able to stop that and say, okay, well, you need to knock that off and actually do something other than that same designed run that you do all the time. Is that something that more teams are going to get wise to, and now maybe Zach should think about trading Lamar Jackson for a haul? Especially after that number one. I mean, if you're looking at the variation of number one quarterbacks in a fantasy season, there hasn't been a repeat number one quarterback in, I want to say 15 seasons or something like that.
No, I think he'll definitely drop down below 4.
Okay.
I'd say below 4 or 5. I don't think he'll be a top 5 quarterback this next year.
But what kind of a trade value do you think somebody like, I mean, let's just compare the two. Somebody like Kyler Murray, and we are going to get into some of his weapons here in a second with some of the other keepers. But would you be able to get a better haul with the potential of Kyler Murray or with what Lamar Jackson has accomplished this last year?
I think people would rather, they'd be more willing to give more for Lamar Jackson for sure, just because he's proven himself at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm more of a fan for the kind of sneak attack potential players. So I would put my money on Kyler Murray over Lamar Jackson.
And, with Kyler Murray, he does now have DeAndre Hopkins that he's throwing to. He has, we mentioned it before, his different options. And that's kind of Arthur's problem. He's looking at DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, what do you do with that?
I would say probably you should trade Hopkins. I would think you could get quite a bit for him, and I think that maybe the value that he's proven up until this point could be beneficial, but I don't think that he's going to be able to sustain.
So now Arthur does have DeAndre Hopkins at year 3 and Leonard Fournette at year 3 as well. He should, I don't know if he'll keep Leonard Fournette or if that's something that he's going to continue to do. He's also one of those hit or miss, and you do kind of have that guarantee in Hopkins when he's there, but I don't know if he's going to hit that 1,000-yard season. I know we mentioned it before, but when you're looking at keepers and tenure, how much of that plays into a team, especially with Arthur? He does have a lot of younger kind of fellas. Whether it's Cortland Sutton, Phillip Lindsay, his team kind of sucks. How did he get so far? Okay, so the two that we're really comparing is just Hopkins or Fournette.
Right. And, I would think for a team that's overall pretty strong, doing well, like those who have kind of made it to the playoffs and whatnot, I don't see Hopkins being a positive contribution to those teams. But maybe those who are in a little help, like, a used tampon or something. I'm sorry, a bloody puddle. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know what you meant. Okay, got it.
Yeah, well, change the name, Eli. I think he could benefit from someone like Hopkins because anything will really help him at this point. So it's kind of a safe bet for him.
Well, now to kind of contrast that, he has an abundance of riches kind of there at that wide receiver position. Am I right?
Well, yeah, for sure. And especially with Thielen.
Mm-hmm.
Thielen would probably be a good keeper just because with Diggs gone, everything's kind of going to fall more in his hands. So I think he's got a lot of potential, especially after last year. There was definitely room for improvement. And so I think not having Diggs, I think Thielen would be the wise choice to hang on to.
You think Thielen over Will Fuller? Now that DeAndre Hopkins has kind of vacated that number 1 role, he is the speed guy in Houston. He has that year 3 choice between Will Fuller or Adam Thielen. Thielen over
Fuller? Yeah, I would say because with Hopkins gone, all Fuller's going to do is decrease Watson's value.
He is kind of injury prone, and he has shown that over the last several seasons. He'll get a couple good games, and that's great, but...
Right. He's just not reliable.
Mm-hmm.
So not worth the gamble.
Sure. Well, and like I mentioned, he does have kind of... he also has Jarvis Landry, who is the number 1 over there. There's D.D. Westbrook, that when Chark went down, he was the only guy, but otherwise, we're going to kind of jump over to, with Will Fuller, Deshaun Watson. Now... Steel Dynasty has Deshaun Watson at year 3. Another one that he has in year 3, who hopefully is now healthy, and we mentioned it before, is Ben Roethlisberger. he's looking at another quarterback situation. I don't know that anybody really wants to trade for Roethlisberger, or now that Deshaun Watson lost his number one weapon, is it going to be something you should just cut your losses and move on with whichever quarterback you prefer? He's going to pick Roethlisberger over Watson, but I don't know. That's a good call. But I mean, are you going to cut it and move on, or what are you going to do? Because again, who's going to trade for Deshaun Watson, or who would trade for Roethlisberger in this situation? Is there anybody starved at quarterback?
No, but I think Roethlisberger might be worth hanging on to for sure over Watson, just because of his new tight end.
Definitely has a higher upside there with the tight end, but and I mean with the rest of them, I know Brady's thrown to Godwin, and we chatted about the GOAT a couple minutes ago with Flying Dutchman, but I mean he also has Robinson. He's got Deontay Johnson, that's another Pittsburgh player. I mean, where does he go from here? Where does he go from here?
Who?
Sean. We're still talking about Sean.
I don't know. It's not on my paper.
Well, no. What do you think he does? Like, okay, we're gonna actually change gears here, just because. I know you have your notes. Was there anybody else you really wanted to chat about? Or we're going to go down a list here in a second. No? Okay. That's okay. We're just going to kind of compare. I know we kind of did it with the Dark Knights. If you're going to keep, and we're just going to do kind of a rapid fire situation, either or, okay? You can elaborate on some of them if you want. You don't have to. In this situation, would you rather keep Tyler Boyd, the potential number one in Cincinnati, with Joe Burrow probably throwing him the ball, or are you going to keep Deebo Samuel? San Francisco, Jimmy G.
I'd say probably Deebo.
Yeah, agreed. Now we're going to go over to Boomer Busters. Are you going to keep Mostert, or are you going to keep, say, Marlon Mack, Sony Michel?
I say especially for Deshaun, he'll probably end up keeping Sony Michel. He's got kind of a sweet spot for him.
He does. Amari Cooper or Emmanuel Sanders? We talked about that. Never mind. Okay, we're going to go Flying Dutchman here real quick. He does have kind of abundance at wide receiver, and he's done pretty well with the tenure on it. But he's got Austin Hooper. We talked about him in Cleveland. Are you going to keep Jameis Winston or Carson Wentz?
I'd go Carson Wentz just because of Brady going to Tampa Bay. You don't really know who's going to end up taking the lead with that. So I would.
No, you do. It'll be Brady.
Yeah. More than likely, it'll be Brady.
So where does Winston?
He'll just fizzle out. Or maybe he'll end up with the Browns. You just don't know. Mayfield's doing well enough. Or the Browns. He's trying. The effort is there.
Okay.
I don't know that Winston would have as much luck.
What about David Johnson, who's now with the Texans, or Kenyon Drake, who's still with Arizona?
I'd probably go Johnson.
Disagree 100%.
Okay.
DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster.
I'd go Chark. Schuster hasn't really been playing like he used to.
Well, this last season, Roethlisberger was injured. Is there going to be some kind of a resurgence for him? Again, Flying Dutchman's looking at Devontae Parker. He's got Tyreek Hill. He has Julio Jones. He has DK Metcalf, DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster. He's got, what is that, 3, 4, 5, 6? He could keep 6 wide receivers and be okay. He wouldn't be okay. Don't keep 6 wide receivers. But, he
you're
could.
hogging all the running backs, so...
Yes, and I will continue to hold them as long as I can. But I don't think he keeps a quarterback, especially with guys like Matt Ryan becoming available, or potentially even Drew Brees is probably going to get cut. I don't know if Let's talk your team a minute. Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo. We talked about them a little bit, and you're kind of penchant appeal for them, but who do you keep, Garoppolo or Goff?
I think the failure that occurred at the Super Bowl it broke his spirits a little bit, and that's why last year he wasn't as performing as well as he has the potential.
He had that performance anxiety.
The blue on his jersey wasn't doing enough for him. You cut that out.
No, that's staying in.
What color is it?
All right, moving on. What about Belle or Gurley?
See, that's one that I'm struggling with, and so I'm not quite sure. Especially with Gurley going to the Falcons, it's like that could be exciting because you have Matt Ryan there. But because Gurley's so injury prone, and the fact that his trade is contingent on him passing a physical, like that's kind of sad. So if he passes his physical with flying colors, then I think it could potentially be a really good thing having a strong quarterback in Matt Ryan, to where he could kind of show remnants of the old Gurley that we all love and miss. But I mean, you can't ever tell with him.
Okay.
And Bell, I mean, maybe he's still kind of working out some kinks from his lazy years sitting on the benches, waiting for people to throw money at him. So it's really kind of tough to say. Yeah.
What about Chubb or Eckler? Are you gonna finally just trade one of them already?
I don't know yet. That depends on the day.
Okay. What about N'Keal Harry? Obviously, Tom Brady has left the Patriots.
You can have him. I don't care too much for him.
Okay. Moving on, we're going to go over to the Sea Chicken Chokers. He's got Diggs, who's over in Buffalo. He's got Robert Woods. Would you keep Diggs or Robert Woods?
I would keep Woods.
Over Diggs with Josh Allen?
Yeah, probably. I prefer
Okay.
Robert. I'm more of a Woods fan than Diggs.
All right. What about Aaron Jones or Mark Ingram?
Ingram.
Okay. Julian Edelman, who's still in New England,
Right.
or let's go back to Woods.
Edelman or Woods?
Uh-huh.
I'd probably go Edelman. I think that depends because he could have. Do we know who's taking over for the Patriots?
Well, I mean, it depends. They're probably going to grab somebody in the draft, but they have their backup from this last season, who I do not recall.
Because it could go either way. Edelman could kind of bear the burden of Brady's departure, and he could be overworked to where, he kind of craps all over, or he could kind of step in to take over. It really, it could go either way.
They have Cody Kessler as a backup and Jared Stidham.
Yep, never heard of him.
I don't think anybody had heard of Tom Brady before he took over either, but now look at him.
Okay, yeah. How much of that was Brady or Bill Belichick?
It was all Bill Belichick, but we will see this next year. All right.
We will find out.
To be continued. Moving on. Otherwise, obviously Cass has some choices too. Have we talked about the crusty jugglers much yet? No. Devin Singletary or Adrian Peterson? Adrian Peterson's coming back for yet another year. 150, still rushing more than most of us.
I probably would go Peterson just because I don't think he has a lot of time left in him. I don't think in life, sure, hopefully he has many, many years. But in football, I don't see him hanging in there much longer. And so I think he'll probably try to push and have a killer year and then probably retire afterwards.
Just call it at that point?
Just call it, yeah. Wait for a big success and then kind of leave before he's able to disappoint again.
Okay. What about Mike Evans with Tom Brady throwing him the ball, or T.Y. Hilton with another ancient guy throwing him the ball?
I'd probably go Evans.
Okay.
T.Y. is not always viable, but he's still, I would say he'd be a good late draft pick. But definitely not somebody I would be, stabbing people to draft.
What about injury-prone guys like Darius Geis or Kerryon Johnson for those running backs?
I like Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think he's got a lot more potential and has kind of proven himself a little bit more. Also, Geist is with Washington, and I prefer Peterson.
Well, there you go. All right, what other teams do we have left? I feel like we've kind of touched on all of them. Yeah, I mean that kind of wraps up most of our kind of keeper projections and muddling through what we think each of the teams is going to be. Now, every year going into the draft, because we are on that border, depending on how they decide they're going to do it virtually or what have you this year, we always do the contest. For anybody who's interested, you can submit a guess for the draft, and you get points. Whoever wins. Do it every year. I think Zach has won for the last 5 seasons in a row. Yeah, he is undefeated in that regard. So if anybody wants to challenge him in that, please do, because I am terrible at that game. So please, someone beat him already. All right. Anything else that we want to throw out there before we close this one out?
No, I think that's it. I am looking forward to see what other trades come to be. I think people in our team need to think about trades.
In our league, are you gonna make any trades?
I am open to trades.
Do you want to trade?
We could talk.
Do you want to trade?
I think we might have some grounds.
Well, I gotta get rid of Kelsey. Do you want to trade Kelsey for Kittle?
That hurts me deep, but we'll talk about it.
Well, if anybody else wants Kelsey in the meantime, just know that he is on the trading block. Okay. Again, go to youtube.com. That is theyoutube.com, and search League of Shadows Fantasy Football. We don't get a fancy URL yet because I don't have any subscribers and I need 100. So just go there. That is where, again, we're going to put the punishments. Cass, look forward to that punishment coming down the pike here soon. Otherwise, everyone, until next time.
Let's go 進化する大切なものを Protect my vows